Welcome everybody to our Covers and Coast Soil Health Alberta Conference. I really do appreciate the chatter, you guys. I feel bad that I now am the only one talking. That's too bad. However, something I want to get across, what an amazing room. I mean, thank you for coming. I guess the first person that I need to thank for today is not actually here. So my coworker, Keegan Miller, who's our Alberta territory rep. So he had premature twins. Everyone's doing great just a couple days ago. So Keegan wasn't able to be here, but let's give him a really loud round of applause. Perhaps he'll hear in the hospital. So there are a few things I'm sure Keegan would have done better. However, it was a bit of a panic for me to get out here and everything. So we don't have an agenda, but they're closing the door, so you guys are locked in here for the day anyway. So I'm going to open up today. I'm going to do some housekeeping stuff. And then I'm going to talk about the concepts of plant diversity, why they're important, how a plant grows. And I was going to talk about some different stuff, but 4 o'clock last night I woke up and I thought I should add a couple slides talking about my farm. And then 60 slides later, the entire presentation is about things that I've done on our farm to incorporate plant diversity and soil health. And kind of the idea is there's all different scopes of people on their learning journey. From a soil health perspective. So what I wanted to do is show some of the things that have been successful on our farm and what's been important over our 15-year journey doing this. So it speeds up the pace for those of you that are out there that are just getting started. So I'm going to be on for about an hour to an hour and 15, depending. I've never done this presentation before, so we'll see how it goes. So Adriana, do you want to raise your hand? So we very much want to encourage questions. We want to encourage conversation and networking. So in my presentation, I don't want to speak for Steve and Blucette. I'll let them do that for themselves. But if anyone has any questions at any time, raise your hand. Adriana's going to track you down. And we'll just answer that question right away. Because if you're thinking it, probably half the room is thinking it. At the end, we're going to leave 10 to 15 minutes for questions. And then Steve Kenyon's going to come on before lunch. After lunch, we have Blucette Campbell. And then after Blucette, we have a farm panel. So it's going to be all of us presenters and two producers that have started their soil health journey. So we get a wide variety of perspectives. And basically, all we're trying to do is create as much conversation as we can. So I'm going to get the ball rolling with some questions, but it's more about answering audience questions and having a conversation as a big group. Now, I know that this room can be intimidating to ask questions. You know, none of us want to sound stupid. Of course, I'm going to say lots of stupid stuff, so hopefully you guys just feel comfortable asking any question that you might have. But please, I really want to encourage questions. Normally, I have hats to give out for people that are asking questions, but that was a Keegan department, so my apologies. But please ask away. So let's get an idea of who's with us today as far as types of farms or industry. So who in here is just grain farming? Grain farming. Okay, cool. Okay, who in here is mixed grain and cattle? Okay. Who in here doesn't farm, just from industry, just curious about what's going on? Nice. Great to hear. And then who's in here that's just livestock? Nice. Who's got Hereford cattle? It doesn't look, you guys don't look like you get offended that easy. So there's 3 cows standing in a pasture. There's a Hereford, there's an Angus, and there's a Simmental. And a lightning bolt, boom, strikes the pasture, and the whole pasture's ablaze. And the Angus looks at the other 2 cows and says, well, I'm not sticking around here to get burnt to death. Runs up to the fence, jumps over the fence, runs into the distance. So the Simmental cow, as the flames get closer and closer and closer, the Simmental cow looks back, looks at the Hereford, looks at the fence, and says, I'm not sticking around here to get burnt to death. Runs up to the fence, goes under the fence, runs off into the sunset. The Hereford's standing there, you know, they're docile, looking back at the flames, looking at the fence, looking back at the flames, and says, well, I'm not sticking around here to get burnt to death. Prolapses and dies. So I pick on Herefords only because I heard that from a Hereford producer, a very good friend of mine. Uh, so we're going to get into it, and not to depress people right off the start, but this is the reason why I'm here. And even if you don't know it, this is the reason a lot of you are here. So what we're looking at, a shout out to Darren Qualman, that handsome man right there. He put together this graph. This is almost 100 years of Statistics Canada data on farm profitability, okay? So this blue line here, that blue line is gross productivity, gross production. So we've been told as ag producers, produce, 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 bigger calves, more yield. The more you produce, the more money you get, the more money that you're going to make. Anyone guess what this green line is here? That is net farm income. This is the gap between what we're producing and what actually returns to the farm. So this graph explains a lot of what is going on in agriculture right now. Why rural populations are declining. Why young people do not want to get involved in agriculture. And the most devastating for a person like me, what this graph is doing is it's degrading our most valuable resource of all, which is our topsoil. So I was born in 1987, which was right about there. So for every dollar invested in the last 37 years in agriculture, it has yielded a return of 2 cents. If we don't start addressing this fundamentally, we don't have a next generation in agriculture. Things aren't going to slow down or stay the same speed. They're going to expedite, and we're going to have less people involved producing our food. We're going to have more corporate farms, and we're going to have more rapid degradation of our land. So I'll start with the depressing part of it, although I think I show this at the start of every one of my presentations. If any of you have seen this, this was eye-opening to me because I was one of those farms. We were growing good crops. We were spending the money. We were growing high yields, and damn it, there was no money left at the end for us. And it makes you feel like you're a failure. You're less of a human being. Every one of my neighbors is doing the same thing, and yet I'm the one that's struggling here. When fact of the matter is, this is a universal agriculture problem. All of us are stuck on this rabbit wheel of production, 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 and less goes to the farm every single year. Don't believe me? Well, we're going to talk about some budgets here. So I'm going to talk about this more later in my presentation, but this is an up-to-date canola budget. So I'm from Southwest Manitoba. This is a Manitoba cost of production budget. And according to the Manitoba government, which they are pretty accurate with their numbers, it costs $673 to grow 1 acre of canola. So based on what the price was at our local elevator a couple days ago, $13.23 a bushel, before the farm makes one single dollar, you have to grow 51 bushels of canola to break even. That is both extremely overwhelming, but an amazing opportunity, which is we need to stop producing these small amounts of monocrops. And what we need to do is start diversifying the revenue streams on farm, start using our land more efficiently and capturing more sunlight. And that's the basis of my presentation today. So I called the 96 rule. Steve over there, he calls it something different. Who's right? We'll never know. So 96% of every plant on planet Earth is made up of just 3 minerals: carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. If I had a bunch of hats to give away, I'd make you guys guess what those are. But seeing it's a big room and it's early in the morning, I'll give you a hint. So carbon, it's a byproduct of the most wonderful chemical reaction on planet Earth. It is the reason for life on Earth, and that is photosynthesis. Plants have the ability to take energy from the sun, convert that energy into liquid carbon that's used for life, that every single one of us, every living being on planet Earth needs to live. Hydrogen and oxygen. Anyone know what that is? Water. H2O. So 96% of every plant on planet Earth is made up of sunlight and water. And when was the last time you saw the Western producer or the cooperator talk about how do we capture sunlight and water more efficiently. I spent 5 years at the University of Manitoba. They gave me an agricultural degree, and nobody told me that 96% of plants are made up of sunlight and water, and that it was possible to capture those two things more efficiently. All we do in agriculture is focus on the 4%, or the 2.5% that Steve's going to talk about. All we focus on is nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur. Those are what we buy. Those we can adjust the rates. They adjust our yield. It's all we focus on. The 96% is absolutely free, and I'm telling you, we can capture water and sunlight more efficiently. The 4% is what's causing that graph and what's making our production go up and our profitability go down. So what I like to, this presentation was called maximizing the 96%. It has since changed since 4 o'clock last night, but it's fundamentally good to understand the concept of plant diversity, and that's what I'm going to cover here for the first bit of the presentation. So we got two systems here. We got a system that human beings have been screwing around with for 1,000 or so years, a few thousand years at the longest. And we got a system that Mother Nature has been experimenting with for 400 million years. Can you guys guess which system captures sunlight and water more efficiently than the other? Of course, it is this one here. However, monocrop, polycrop, cover crop, it doesn't matter. The properties of plants work the exact same way no matter how they're grown. So a plant grows in a vegetative state. It puts on leaf biomass. It captures sunlight, and it converts that sunlight into liquid carbon. And then rather than taking all of that energy and keeping it for itself, that plant releases about 40% of that energy into the soil. It's called a root exudate. It produces energy, it produces protein, it produces hormones to put into the soil. Now, why would a plant that has the evolutionary advantage to capture sunlight give half of it away voluntarily? Why would a plant do that? It's because a plant cannot grow itself. You know, Earth and Mars have the exact same physical and chemical properties, identical. You know what the difference between Earth and Mars is fundamentally? Biology. A plant releases that energy into the soil profile to feed the microbiology, and that biology is now responsible to go into the soil profile, access the minerals that that plant needs, and take it back. That, in the soil health world, is called a symbiotic relationship. The plant, the soil, and the soil biology are one. You take one of those away, and none of them exist. All three of those things work together in a symbiotic relationship. Now, you're saying, Joe, that canola plant is no longer in vegetative state. You can see its bright yellow flowers. It has now hit reproduction, okay? And we got a nice clean field. There's not a single weed out there. That canola is perfectly level, okay? This plant, when it hits reproduction, it starts producing seeds. So now the energy it's capturing, it's not releasing 40% to the soil biology. It's keeping it for itself, for the next generation. So if we got a field that is 100% flowering canola, what's producing a root exudate to feed that biology? Nothing. What is that biology now surviving on? Plants cannot grow without it. Even when you've got a tilled black field, that biology is alive and living and has to be. If there's no biology, there's no plants. So what's feeding that biology when the plant's not feeding it? I heard of soil carbon. I owe you a hat, whoever said that. So they're living on soil carbon. And what do we call soil carbon in agriculture? Organic matter. So take 100 years of monocultures that stay vegetative for 40 days when we're getting 270 days that we could capture sunlight. Instead, we're capturing 40, times that by 100 years, and that's why our soils now have 1/3 the carbon that they once had in just 100 years. So let's move over to this system, a system that I'm much more comfortable and excited to talk about. This is how we maximize sunlight capture. So when we're talking about maximizing sunlight capture and maximizing water, we capture sunlight first. So something you'll notice is the plants are different height. Different plants capturing sunlight at different levels. So the plants fundamentally in nature that grow really tall need sunlight the most. They produce lignin so they can grow tall and they can get direct sunlight from the sun. These plants that hang out down here, these are what's in nature a purpose for a legume. They don't have an upright plant physiology. They're able to wind and weave, capture sunlight. If the roots in the ground here and there's sunlight over there, a hairy vetch plant can go over there and capture sunlight. They have a much lower sunlight need. They're higher in protein, which we call nitrogen. Legumes are nitrogen self-fixators. They produce their own because they have such high demand, and lower energy. So they're able to actually live in that canopy and grow better because there's shade. That isn't how they evolved for 400 million years. So this system has plants that are in reproduction, of course, but it also has indeterminate plants. It has vegetative plants. The energy from the sun to the soil never shuts off in Mother Nature's system. That biology is always being fed by a living plant, and that biology doesn't have to survive and start pulling carbon out of our organic matter. You can see, of course, different rooting levels, different access to more minerals that exist in the soil, and we're going to cover that in a little bit. So this is a real life, this is a full season cover crop. This is what we're trying to mimic with cover crops, is diversity to utilize sunlight capture. So if we have a diversity of plant species, we have a diversity of root exudates. Each plant produces a different root exudate that attracts different microbiology. So diversity of root exudates equals a diversity of soil microbes. So if we have well-fed, diverse soil microbes, we have a functioning soil. A functioning soil can infiltrate water, nitrogen, oxygen, and surface area, so the biology has access to all the minerals that it needs to supply that plant. It doesn't have a dependency on synthetics. So I did leave this in the presentation because I thought it might be helpful. So this was all the way back in 2018. This was my first ever full season cover crop that I attempted. So to give you some context, I was soil health curious at this point. We started incorporating perennials. We started doing a little bit of intercropping, but this idea of a full season, a full year dedicated to plant diversity, this was a brand new concept. So I had got bit by the soil health bug, and this was a buzz. So the other thing I had was a fresh degree where I was not taught this, but I was taught this. I could read this even now. I have a hard time diving into the numbers. I could knock the rust off. But 2.7% organic matter, virtually no soluble phosphorus, virtually no soluble nitrogen, and high pH. This was the reason this went into full season cover crop, is this was the worst land on the farm. So it was at this time my now business partner, Travis, and I, he was the soil tester. So we wanted to document this. We thought work, not work, it'd be interesting to get some data on it because nobody had ever heard of this. So we took the soil test, Trav and I, over a few beers, said nothing's going to grow here. There's virtually no minerals available to those plants. Why would it? So this was about the time where I started getting curious with this crop. So when we talk about plant diversity, number of species, that's great, fantastic. But if I take 120 pounds of oats and add 14 species to it, we're going to get photosynthesis 99% out of those 120 pounds of oats. What we need to achieve plant diversity is plants capturing sunlight so they can produce a root exudate. Diversity does us no good if the species we plant can't capture the sunlight. So you can see this was, I think this was only 8 species and the wrong species. It was my first time doing it. But really what I want you to focus on, the leaf architecture, the amount of different leaf shapes that are able to capture sunlight. The more leaf shapes, the more diversity, the more root exudates being produced into the soil. So this is where my head started exploding, because I knew uptake removal charts really great, and I knew that soil test said there was virtually nothing there, and yet 25 days in, as this crop is absolutely exploding from a vegetation standpoint, we are not seeing any mineral deficiencies. Now, why is that? Sorry, I'm going to pick on some grain farmers now. It's like my funnest hobby is picking on grain farmers. Grain farmers, sorry, I need you to raise your hand. Okay, so that crop had 6 parts per million phosphorus, which is about 12 pounds to the acre. The amount of vegetation that's there, there's probably already 60 pounds of phosphorus being pulled. Where's the phos coming from? No. So this is yes, kind of. The answer is this was honestly going to be what my presentation was going to be about. Adriana, where are you? You're going to have to keep the time on me because I'm going down a tangent here. So when we soil test, the only thing we test is soluble nutrients. How many minerals are available to that plant on that specific day? Most of the soil testing is done in fall. That plant's not going to uptake those nutrients for another 8 months. Okay? So that soil test said we have 12 pounds soluble phosphorus. I didn't even know this at the time. You can test for total nutrients that are in a soil. Any guesses how much phosphorus? Over 49 farms in Western Canada and North Dakota, 0 to 12 inches. How much phosphorus average over those 49 farms? Whoops. I'm not moving on until somebody guesses. Like 100 probably? Maybe 200? 2,300 pounds of phosphorus, 0 to 12. 11,000 pounds of potassium, 2,000 pounds sulfur, 40,000 pounds calcium, 20,000 pounds magnesium. 78% of the air we're breathing right now is nitrogen. Everything we need to grow a plant exists in the atmosphere: carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen. And everything else we need to grow a plant is right there in our top 12 inches of topsoil. Degraded as hell, yes, but it's all there. What are we missing? Why can't we access that? Heard the answer. Microbes, absolutely. We don't have a mineral deficiency. What we have is a deficiency of life in our soils. So that is what was going on. I'm going to have to speed this up because I realized I'm definitely going to go long here. The next thing that we did, growing that cover crop, basically the goal of the cover crop at that time was maximize the benefit to my soil. And you maximize soil benefits, by the 5 principles of soil health. The most important one, in my opinion, being animal integration. We just want to mimic what was going on here before we started screwing up Mother Nature's systems. So the idea is grow the plant diversity, stimulate the biology, and use livestock to cycle that all right back. What are the 2 things when you're balancing a cattle ration that are focused on the most? What are the 2 energy sources that when you're trying to come up with a ration for a cow in the 3rd trimester, what are the 2 benchmarks we always talk about? Protein and energy, right? So the biology that's in the soil are carbon-based life forms. They need every single thing that we need. They need air, water, food, shelter. In the soil, above the soil, all carbon-based life forms have the same thing. So when we're trying to balance a ration for our livestock below the soil, we don't call it protein and energy, we call it carbon and nitrogen. But all you have to think about is a ration you give to a cow. You want to balance the amount of energy and the amount of protein. Carbon being energy, nitrogen being protein. So everyone's familiar, you grow a crop of wheat. If you're going to zero till in that wheat, how long is that stubble there? Long time. We have a carbon to nitrogen imbalance. We've got way, way too much carbon and not enough nitrogen to balance our ideal microbial diet. Now, if we grow an alfalfa crop and go mow it before it flowers, how long is that alfalfa crop around? Quick, right? It's gone. We've got too much protein and not enough energy. So also what we're trying to achieve with plant diversity is to keep the feed source for our biology balanced at all time. And livestock can help with that. Obviously, plant diversity is the main key with different plants that have different energy and protein levels. Will I see land improvements in 1 year? So this was the following year. I enjoyed that crop so much. I thought, what the hell, let's do it again. And we saw something just amazing when I was digging around out there. So I went to the doctors and professors on Twitter and showed them this picture, and I got quite a bit of traction. So what's going on here is, you see these, the yellow? So that was actually worms that had pulled up subsoil and had capped their holes. And this is literally how soil gets built. But this is my favorite. I'm just going to take that away. This is my favorite tool on the farm. If you gave me one option of tools that I could use on my farm to understand my soil, it's a water infiltrator. That is a 6-inch ring, 500 milliliters of water. You dump in that ring, equates to 1 inch. So why is infiltrating water important? Yes, but also 75% of our plants are made up of hydrogen and oxygen. Anyone experienced a drought before? So what this does is, yes, of course, it tells you how quickly an inch of water can infiltrate into the soil. But really what it's telling you is how much life you have in your soil, how stable your soil aggregates are, how much root exudates you're feeding that biology to keep that soil stable. Have you balanced the carbon and nitrogen for that biology so they can keep it stable? So really, this is such a powerful tool, because if you can infiltrate water, it means you have stable soil aggregates. If you have stable soil aggregates, you can now, you just don't have a dependency on synthetics. You can capture more sunlight for less cost. And you will be more resilient, absolutely. So lots of people, faces I recognize, have heard this presentation before. How quickly, I don't want you guys answering. So for those of you that are new to this, how quickly does an inch of water infiltrate on a conventionally farmed piece of land? 1 inch of water. Sorry, you sat in the front. That was a huge mistake. 10 minutes? That's a good guess. So I have done this test, I don't know how many times. I poked holes everywhere. The Manitoba government, I prodded them enough, they finally started doing it. So 1 inch generally on a conventionally farmed piece of ground, it takes 1 hour to infiltrate. 2 inches, 2 hours. You guys are too gullible. It's a day for 2 inches of rain. 3 inches of rain, forget about it. It will evaporate before it infiltrates. So now, taking a stable soil aggregate, which now you know comes from diversity and a balanced ration for our microbiology. So this was data from 2020, we'll say, somewhere in there. So this was a canola wheat, 1 inch, 55 minutes exactly. The second inch was 12 to 16 hours. The other side of the road had a full season cover crop. This was done in the fall. 1 inch in 5 minutes, the second inch in 33 minutes. We can see that pretty consistently, and we can do this not necessarily just with 15 species. You can increase your infiltration 10x with 2, just by understanding carbon and nitrogen and keeping a stable soil aggregate. The most valuable tool on the farm is understanding how fast you can infiltrate water. This is what I'm talking about. So we have 2 soils here. These are GPS reference spots, the exact same spot. This was after canola or corn crop. You can see the plates. If you're a biology that has to live in that, how does water infiltrate? How does oxygen infiltrate? How does nitrogen? Where is the pore space so they can go and access those 2,300 pounds of phosphorus that are sitting 0 to 12? This soil is dependent on synthetic fertilizer to produce. There's lots of carbon there. This is the Red River Valley in Manitoba, most valuable land in Western Canada. It will produce if you give it the fertilizer. The biology is not going to. Take the same soil, add 15 species and some good management practices. This is what a healthy soil is supposed to look like. Those balls are stable soil aggregates. What they do is they add surface area and a home for biological communities. So same exact soil, even the color of the soil looks different. But that is 15 species, 6 months apart in one season. Yeah. So this was a trial we did. So that cover crop that I just showed you with the water infiltration. So we ended up doing a year after full season. Uh-oh. We did a year after full season trial because we're on these trials we weren't using any fertilizer, and the argument is, well, shit, you didn't use any fertilizer this year, you're going to have to use double the amount of fertilizer this year. Well, I didn't know a lot at that point, but I knew that that was a flawed theory. So we went back the following year with just a no fertilizer trial. So we did oats on the outside and a whole bunch of different species in the middle, just to document what we saw. So the only thing that happened out here was a glyphosate pass and seed. That was it. But this was the most interesting thing that happened. What 45 minutes already? That's not enough time. So you guys remember how dry 2021 was? We were the same in Manitoba. We had like 1.6 inches in a calendar year. This was the last rain we had, July 1st, 2021. That was 3.5 inches of rain we had. So this is that field that had the cover crop grazed the year before, the no fertilizer. The morning after, 3.5 inches of rain. We infiltrated it. And I would love to tell you my entire farm looked like this, but it didn't. So the forage peas that we grew on this field the year following, they ran double what our conventional forage peas ran. And it all comes from this one single weather event infiltrating that water rather than having it run away. Seeing I'm getting tight for time, I might just quickly touch on mycorrhizal fungi. So who's heard, be honest, who's heard of mycorrhizal fungi? Great news. That's awesome. So I won't touch on it a whole lot. This is the oldest specimen on planet Earth. This thing right here. They found these spores, they've found in volcanic lava, 2.7 billion years old. 95% of plants outside of monocrop brassicas form a relationship with this plant. Not form a relationship, are completely dependent. I called it a plant. It's a fungus. Are completely dependent. It's called a symbiotic relationship. These spores infiltrate the roots of the plants, and it's the same trade-off. I give you energy, you go and access the minerals I need. You can see these little trails. There's a little communication highways going on between plants. This is, we just started scratching the surface of as far as the intelligence and the capability of mycorrhizal fungi. And it's just very exciting where it's going to go, what we've learned in the last 5 years and what we're going to learn in the next 20 years. So I guess any questions? That was kind of the concept part of why plant diversity is important, how plants grow, how microbiology, plants, and soil are symbiotic. So Adriana's back there. Does anyone have any questions from a concept standpoint of plant diversity? I don't usually get a lot of questions on that one. Did you have one? No? You were going to be the first one ever. Shoot. So this is kind of the new part of my presentation. This is the first time I'm doing it. I've zipped through it. But what I wanted to achieve with this was, it's been a really long 15 years. It's been a fun 15 years, but there have been some learning opportunities along the way. That's what I call screw-ups now, is learning opportunities. And I thought for those of you that are curious, maybe just started the journey, I thought, why not put in some practices that I wish somebody told me 15 years ago about how to implement, what are good strategies to use. So here it goes. So this is my list of 6 on the drive here. I thought of 2 more, but we're not going to get to them all. So this is BMPs, better management practices on our farm that we have adapted over the last 15 years. So number one, and this never shows up on budgets. It's never talked about. We're very fortunate. Bluesette Campbell is here and and is going to dive into the topic, but quality of life. This is my family. So my wife and I got married 2 years ago. We were able to get the whole gang back together. I don't farm with all these people. I farm with these people. Isn't that some pretty creative clip art? That's the same picture. It turns out my farm business partners and I don't pose for pictures very often. So this is our farm. Our name is Riot Ranch. So it's my wife Melanie and I, my parents, my brother, and his partner Derek. So 2 years ago, Sheldon and Derek came back to the farm. They're teachers, but always had an interest in farming. So we took the holistic management approach before we incorporated. And we sat down and made a list of what do we want to get out of the farm. And the number one thing that everyone came up with is we want to work together. And I think I thought I was going to be the hippie of the group. It turns out all of us had the same number one. Number two was profitable, of course. And the 3 and 4 is what we're going to kind of dive into, which is what do you enjoy doing on the farm? Make a list of all those things I enjoy doing, and then make a plan to do those things more. On the flip side, what do I not enjoy about farming? Make a list, make a plan on how we do those things less. The second thing that was important for me, I am getting tight for time, so I will buzz over this one. But absolutely, this is fundamentally so important. I didn't learn this lesson until we started an off-farm business known as Covers & Co. But budgeting and planning for cash flow has made farming so much more fun, not lying up at night, worrying about how I'm going to pay that bill, how I'm going to pay that bill. Planning, and there's tools out there. So this is the Manitoba Cost of Production Budgets. I don't think that they exist in Alberta. They might. If they do, use them. The Manitoba ones are great too. But these are accurate costs of what a farm costs, and you can challenge them that your farm's different, and you can put in your own numbers. But an excellent baseline to help understand what on my farm is actually profitable. So this is where it gets into the fun part. And it took me longer than it should have for a guy that now stands up in front of people and talks about capturing more sunlight. But we need to capture more sunlight, and I thought a long time on how to present this one. But I thought I'd just give a very specific example of something that we've picked up as a practice that is just a no-brainer on our farm now. We're doing all the time. So I should give you some context about our farm. So we have about 1,000 arable acres. We've got 400 commercial beef cattle. And basically the goal of our farm is it's a cattle farm that we try and utilize our grain acres for cash flow and for shoulder season grazing. So to lower our winter feed cost is the main goal of the farm, but the cows are the focus. Keep the cows moving is the theme on our farm. So we got a fancy little graph here. So 2 different lines. The light blue line is the ideal growing times for cool season plants. So think a cool season plant, wheat, barley, oats, peas, ryegrass, you name it. These are the ideal times they like growing. When moisture is prevalent, when conditions are a little cooler, heat of summer, 30 degrees, a cool season plant completely shuts down. This bar in the middle, that is the ideal growing conditions for a warm season plant. So think corn, sorghum, millet. They use water more efficiently. 30 degrees, they maximize sunlight capture, whereas a C3 grass, a cool season grass, is shutting down. So what we're trying to do is manipulate this graph as much as we possibly can. So this time of the year, we're in fall. We got a little bit of a cool season bump here. If you're new to soil health, if you're a grain farmer, if you're a cattle farmer, start falling in love with fall rye. Amazing plant. It is winter hardy. I was trying to find a picture of us sowing it at the end of October here. I couldn't. This is obviously springtime, but don't worry about the crop insurance deadline. Apologies if there's anyone from crop insurance here. Get it in the ground. Not for the fall grazing, but this picture is taken like mid-April. You can produce a ton of plant biomass when everything else is sitting there black, not capturing sunlight whatsoever. So now we're getting to the end of the cool season cycle. This is kind of the end of spring. We've got a fall rye crop that looks like this. This is just the amazing part about fall rye is the flexibility. I wouldn't suggest letting your fall rye get that mature. It gets less palatable the more mature it gets, but you can silage it, you can dry hay it, you can graze it, which is what we try and do. We'll quite often calve cows on it, but all we've done, all this biomass was in a shoulder season that otherwise we were going to waste our sunlight and moisture, put it to use, grow a plant. So now we're getting to summertime, losing our opportunity from a cool season grass standpoint. Now is the time for C4 grasses, warm season plants. These plants evolved around the equator. A sorghum Sudan plant uses water 80% more efficiently than an oat plant. 30 degrees, I told you guys this. C4 grass is maximizing sunlight capture. A C3 grass, shutting down. You're not getting any capture. C4 plants have a waxy leaf, which I'm going to talk about in a bit. The evolutionary purpose of that is to reflect sunlight. So it's not absorbing it, so it has to cool it. It's reflecting it back, so it runs cooler. So this was our warm season cover crop this past spring. This was seeded about the 1st to 3rd of July, somewhere in there. And this is what that crop looked like come mid-September. So yes, it looks like a lot of sorghum Sudan grass, but the nice thing about sorghum is it is such a resilient plant. Unbelievable how drought tolerant it is. And then when you do get moisture, it just absolutely takes off. Yeah.
So are you doing multiple plantings, or are you just doing a single planting per season, or how does that work?
That is a good question. The drill moves a lot at our place, all times of year.
Like we're a livestock people, we don't have plantings, so I'm just wondering how that crosses over. And then since like conditions like that, is there options as a person to look at and what they would do?
Well, one of the good things about doing a budget, I realized I can generally pay somebody to come in and seed for me cheaper than we can do it owning the equipment. Depreciation, breakdown, repairs, and time is such a big one for us. So we do own our own drill, mostly for springtime when everyone else is seeding, so we can get it in there. However, don't be afraid. Crunch the numbers for your own farm. I think that's very, very important. But don't be afraid to get somebody in. They can do it as cheap as you in most cases.
You're doing it what, a couple times a year or more than that?
The drill moves from April. This year, the drill moved from April 15th to October, end of October. We were still putting rye in. You can't capture sunlight unless you have a plant growing, and that's our theory. So now we get to the end of summer. So we're heading into fall, back into the cool time. This is such an amazing advantage of sorghum Sudan specifically I'm going to talk about, but just plant diversity from a digestibility standpoint. So this was the cows went into this field a couple days earlier. They kind of knocked things down, but look at how well they cleaned that up. Sorghum Sudan has lower lignin stalk and it stays vegetative for longer. So if you can get a 6-foot high plant that stays vegetative, the sugars stay in the stalk, those animals will take that down just like you see there. So this is another trial that I wanted to do this year, just in the name of reducing inputs, reducing the amount of time. So we took this field and we cut it in half. So half the field is swath grazing, half the field is standing grazing. The snow came about 2 days after I took this picture, so we weren't able to get the data on what they left behind in both systems, but something we'll take a look at in spring. But extremely versatile crop that you can seed in July. Yeah. So many. Yes. I think my 5th point is grazing management. Yeah, you betcha. Yeah, it is. Grazing plan. Look at that. So for the grain farmers, I said to somebody this fall, we were combining, And they said, "Oh, I didn't realize you grain farmed." And I said, "Oh, we don't do a whole lot anymore." I said, and I don't know why. I'm pretty much the only one that enjoys it." And then I had to look myself in the mirror and think, "Do I even enjoy it anymore?" So that's something that I'm going to have to figure out going forward. But these are just 3 crops that are absolute no-brainers, in my opinion. If you're a mixed grain and cattle farmer, you should look at production on some of these crops. If you're a straight grain farmer, you should make friends with your livestock neighbor. You can increase the profitability on your land, your utilization, and it's going to help your neighbor out as well. So this one, we've started growing annual ryegrass for seed production about 5 years ago. So 3 revenue streams off the same crop. So this crop that we're combining here, we had $26 worth of seed into, 40 pounds of nitrogen, which is $25, and 1 single herbicide pass in crop. So those were our expenses. Of course, we had land, insurance, depreciation, time, all those wonderful things. But we got 1,600 pounds this past year. It's not always this good. We budget for 1,250 pounds an acre. At 55 cents a pound, it was $880 in return just on the seed. Now, harvest happens the end of July. The straw that was coming out of the back of the combine, there was roughly 3,000 pounds an acre that I valued at 4 cents a pound. So an additional $120 an acre off the same land. And I'll go back. This is Melanie standing with her bottle-fed calf, but we kicked the cows out and had 90 grazing days per acre that we value to the grain farm at $1.75 a day, so $157. So for $26 in seed, $25 in nitrogen, and a herbicide pass at $15, our gross revenue per acre was over $1,100. And again, it was spreading out. Add more revenue streams to each acre, and you lower your risk considerably. So if anyone's heard me speak, they've heard me yammer on about corn and corn intercropping. So in my opinion, if you're a mixed grain and cattle producer and you're growing corn, that is the no-brainer of no-brainers. So what, obviously we just have regular old grain corn here, 30-inch spacing. I can't, 70-11 or something was the corn. But the interesting part is the long season forage soybeans. So I told you guys a vegetative plant still produces a root exudate. So when we're talking about a legume producing a root exudate forms a relationship with rhizobium bacteria, which captures what from the atmosphere? Nitrogen. So if we had a conventional soybean, they're about that big at the summer solstice. That plant hits reproduction because it's got to produce seeds. The purpose of the soybean is for grain production, so it's about that big, hits reproduction, stops capturing nitrogen. With a long season forage soybean, what we do is it's 110 days before it hits reproduction, roughly. That plant, now rather than being this big and 40% of that energy going to root exudate, that plant is now this big, capturing sunlight for 110 days, producing a root exudate, not only, what does that mean? 30. Okay. I don't know. Yeah, well, we'll deal with that. So, yeah, that plant is now capturing energy between the rows of the corn. It's not competing with the corn at all. Capturing sunlight, 40% of that energy to feed the biology, but most importantly, it's capturing nitrogen, both to feed the corn and residual for next year. And I shouldn't say most importantly, because this is what it looks like after we combine. So the corn actually protects the soybeans from frost. So when we get a frost, the corn dies and the soybeans still stay green like that. Next thing we do is kick the cows out, absolutely maximize as much grazing as we can before the snow comes. So this past year, we were only able to get about half of our corn acres before snow, and the snow reduced our grazing, cut it literally down by 2/3. But it's not a soil health presentation unless there's a cow shit there. It was, what we're doing is we're balancing the energy and protein or the carbon and nitrogen to the cow. The corn is very, very high energy, low protein. It's slow breakdown because that biology needs a protein source to break it down. The forage beans, extremely high protein, and low energy. And that's what I was telling you about water infiltration. We can take a monocrop corn crop and increase the water infiltration 5 to 10x just by adding a vegetative legume into it, because that biology now has a balanced energy source to be able to keep those stable soil aggregates and have a functioning soil. Oh, and this is what the return looked like this year. Not quite as good. It looked a lot better when corn was $8, but so same thing. We had 40 pounds of nitrogen on our corn. The seed was not $26 an acre. It was closer to 100. And then we grazed 90 days. Like I told you, on the stuff we could graze. The other half we got like less than 30. But at $1.75 a day, $732. Even in a conventional system, we can cover our costs. Mine is reduced significantly. So this was a crop I did years ago. Oats have kind of worked its way out of our rotation, but they are going to be making a comeback. So this was an oats hairy vetch perennial ryegrass crop, and the idea was we're going to use the vetch to both capture nitrogen, improve the quality of the straw, and regrow later in fall with the perennial ryegrass, and we can kick the cows back out. So what happened is we got like 20 inches of rain in August. I think it was like 26. And the vetch basically took over. Thank God I have a 9600 combine. That was not an issue. But this is what the feed ended up looking like. So we feed tested. It was like 13% protein. Absolutely rocket fuel. We fed it to bred heifers. They absolutely loved it. But in the name of making the cows work for you, reducing your inputs, reducing your risk, this is where I see a ton of opportunity. So does anyone do straw bunching in this room? And I've asked you about it already, so I know all the information from you. So the idea with this is I've actually just bought one of these. Rather than bale the straw, this collects both the straw and the chaff in about, what would it be, Kevin? 50 to 100 pound piles? Yeah. So you're catching everything that's coming out of the back of the combine. It piles it there so the cows can find it if and when there is snow. And the goal is with this blend that we're going to experiment with this year of oats, yellow peas, vetch, turnip, IRG, and winter trit, we want to increase the value of that straw. We want to lower inputs. We want to keep things green and growing so we can graze even after. And yeah, this is something I'm super excited about going forward. Oh, I added this at the end. So I figured there would be some interest in, well, there's a ton of interest these days in soil health products. So everyone seems to have a bug in a jug. Everyone wants to ask me about fulvic acid and humic acid. So I thought, why not just put the soil health products that we've used on our farm that we've had success with? So the number one thing I would recommend, you hear a lot about humic acid, and depending on the production method, all of them are different. Basically, fundamentally, what it comes down to for me is it's digestible carbon that will stimulate my biology and help me in the long term. Now, if you're wanting to do a trial with humic acid and you're going to put 5 pounds down and do a yield monitor, you might not see results. Straight up. I believe in the concept of adding carbon, supplementing my land with carbon, and that's why I use it. I do not expect yield returns year one. Yeah, you betcha. A little. Yep. 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 Okay. Okay. Yep. So here's my response to biological products. All of the a biological stimulant though. Yeah. So everything that the soil needed to stimulate biology, to have a healthy ecosystem, was there. And I haven't used best, but I've used biologicals, and it's not that I think they're snake oil at all. I think it's the correct path for us to be going. The fundamental question I would challenge anyone that's buying a biological is, all of this biology, all of the stimulants were there. They were there naturally, and now they're not. That's why we're seeing responses with biologicals. But what you need to ask yourself is, fundamentally, why are they not there now? And if you can't solve that problem, it's going to turn into an input, because you're going to put it on every year. You're going to see response, and then those biological communities will die. You do it again, you'll see a response. So, yeah, I think that it's a good segue into the soil health world, especially if you're a grain farmer. But stay curious and don't think that's the be all end all, because if you're using it every year, it's an input. A biological should be a means to an end of stimulating your soil and having it do it all on its own. I was hoping to avoid the glyphosate conversation today. Glyphosate? Glyphosate is not registered as a herbicide. It is registered as an antibiotic. How a glyphosate works is, the plant absorbs it. It literally is released in the root exudates, and it terminates the biology responsible for that plant's immune system. And that plant dies from fungal diseases. It's not the glyphosate. I do struggle with this one. Damn it, I'm taking up precious time talking about glyphosate. uh, Glyphosate bad, no doubt about it. You want to dive into the science and the human health and the environmental effect of glyphosate, you can go down a rabbit hole. And I'm not saying it's all true, but definitely some of it is true. I do use it, with strictly and only. So we've probably reduced our glyphosate use 90%, and 100% of the time we use glyphosate, we mix it with fulvic acid. So fulvic acid is a chelator. What it does is, when a glyphosate molecule hits a living plant, it has to enter through the stomata, and why would a plant want that to enter? It's going to kill it. So it closes the stomata up. So you got to use more and more and more glyphosate. So what fulvic acid does, it's a digestible carbon. It chelates with the glyphosate molecule, so it's able to ingest more, so you can get away with less. The other thing is, it stays chelated right into the soil. So now, rather than this antibiotic floating around the soil that no biology wants to consume and start the breakdown, there's a digestible carbon attached to it. So what happens is, you can start the breakdown of glyphosate in your soil. Now, I'm not saying it happens quickly. It's a long process, but the first step is reduction. Second step is elimination, and we are going to get there eventually. But it is the worst addiction I've ever had, and I've successfully beat alcohol. Nicotine's the next one, and then I'll take on glyphosate. I don't spray anything on my vegetable garden. Glyphosate? No, we only use glyphosate strictly as a pre-emergence burn down. That's what we use it on our farm. So it never goes on a living plant. So low salt fertilizer, I mean, that's just a good practice. Lots of biology in the soil. Does not like salt. Mycorrhizal fungi being the most prominent one. I put melted urea. Don't ask me about it, please. Look it up online. I've got a video. But more the split applications of fertilizers. So nitrogen does not need 100 pounds, a plant doesn't need 100 pounds of nitrogen as a seedling. What it needs is like 0.7 of a pound a day throughout the vegetative life, or whatever. So the more you can split it up, the more you can utilize that fertilizer. And just from a cost standpoint, you can get away with less because you're split applicating, but also just you're going to burn less carbon in your soil because you're not going to be over applying, and you're going to lose less. And we, of course, use compost, lots of different compost teas. We don't do as much anymore, but granulated compost and then just good old-fashioned cow manure. Grazing plan. So what do I got, Adriana? 15, sweet. So I know Blusette's going to talk about this. I know Steve's going to talk about this. So I just want to talk about it just from the context of my own farm. A 1 year into the future grazing plan changed our cattle operation. Just knowing 12 months in advance where to haul winter feed, where the cows are going to be. The biggest difference we saw immediately was we were able to do things like this, which was stockpiled grazing. You can see the creek still kind of frozen. But I would say the second thing is know your cost of production on your winter forages. Because if you know your cost of production is 6 cents and the neighbor's selling hay for 5, that is the best trade-off that you can make importing all those nutrients. So, for example, this year, what we were able to do was, because the price of hay was, I'm still buying hay for 2026, just because I know my cost of production with our insane land prices is about 7 cents a pound for hay, and I can buy it for 4. So what we were able to do was, basically we bought all of our feed for this year for between like 4 and 5 cents. And then we were able to both import those minerals, which is fantastic, but we were able to take our cover crop ground and graze livestock on it, which is the key for us. Soil improvement is the name of the game, and that's a huge benefit for us. And the other thing is you get this. If anyone's bale grazed before, so this is where we bale grazed last year, a little bit of a hilltop, poor land. That land is now, with the right management practices, healed forever. So it'll take a year or two. We have a zero-till disc drill. We tried to seed through that, didn't work super, but the idea is for the next 20 years, or with good management practices, we've healed that soil. Shoulder seasons. So on our cow herd, our winter feed cost is about $3 a day times 400 cows. That's $1,200 every day. If I can increase our shoulder season grazing 2 months of the year, 60 days, that's $75,000 in savings on our farm. So those months of October, November, December, March, April, if you can figure out a way to get the cows on the land, not eating a bale or starting a tractor, lots of years, when calves aren't $2,500, that's going to be the profit you make on your livestock operation in a year. And keep the cows moving. Always. We are moving cows almost constantly. They're getting really, really good at it, which I think is another important management practice on your farm is get the cows trained so they'll follow you. It's super handy when they get out. And my last one, I'll jump through this really quick because I want to get to the gratitude section of this. Stay curious. Be open to new ideas. Do budgets on things that you're not necessarily comfortable with. I'll give you just one example. So 2024, I was doing grain budgets. I saw that best case scenario, we're going to break even. We were going to spend a ton of money. So I'm not saying I'm a genius, but I figured that the cattle market was going to stay strong. So what we did was, start of April, we went out and bought 200 commercial cows that fit with our operation. They were May calvers. The very next day, we went out and started seeding 400 acres to cover crops to graze those. So this is, I think, April either 15th or 16th. This was the first paddock that the cows grazed. So this is the 2nd of July, I believe. So this was the last paddock the cows grazed on the first run around. Of course, everything regrows and the cows grazed it again. And this was the result. This is what we were trying to achieve. So this is my friend Michael Teely. He's out taking some soil samples and we're doing water infiltrations and whatnot. But that soil is absolutely protected. There's digestible plant biomass there. We can cycle nutrients. Everything that was grown on that land is now given back other than what the cows took. And then, well, I thought, let's just keep the ball rolling. So at end of September, we went out every acre that we grazed. We went and sowed direct seeded fall rye into. And the plan is we'll see what spring brings. We can graze it, we can hay it, we can silage it. But likely that's probably going to be our grain farming for next year. So my hope is that the drill was in the field the previous fall, and the next implement to enter the field will be the combine in 2025. So I got to take 1 minute. We've got a full room here, and I'm a bit of a, I don't want to say suck, that's the wrong word, but incredibly grateful for you people that are in this room today. This is our team. So 5 years ago, myself and that guy had a dream that we could make cover crops cool. We thought the story was amazing, and we thought that it would resonate with people. So, oh man, do I have an appreciation and respect for any small business owner. It has been an absolute journey. But it's led us here to a full room of people that are interested in hearing the message, to our team that I just care so greatly about. Amazing what you can achieve with vision aligned people that are curious and willing to work for it. We've got a dealer network across Western Canada now that I am just over the moon proud of. These people took a risk on us. I'm so grateful that we can provide value to their farm, but also they can provide value to us with what they see, how we can improve, new blend ideas. We are just barely scratching the surface as far as what plant diversity can do for conventional agriculture. So I'm speeding through here. This is a trial we started this past summer that we are going to keep ramping up as long as we can find funders. So last summer, there were 150,000 acres worth of Covers & Co cover crops across Western Canada, 100,000 of which were one specific blend, which was our full season cover. And I get extremely frustrated with academia and research because what we're trying to measure is just so complex and so difficult that I think only scale can solve this issue. And we have done that. So we have cover crops on a broad number of acres with different soil types, different climates. And basically what we wanted to do was start testing this crop. So you can see in the top left there, so different things that we measured: rainfall, soil type, grazing days, tonnage, feed quality, fertilizer, and start making correlations between, hey, I put fertilizer on and here was my result, versus, hey, I didn't put fertilizer on, same rainfall, same soil type, here was my result. Hey, I farm in Peace River, here's what my soil type's like, here's the species I saw, here was the biomass. Maybe we can find a correlation between Southwest Saskatchewan. So this is a research project that we are actively working on, and are going to continue to actively work on. To what we want to achieve is the biggest cover crop data set that planet Earth has ever seen. That sounds impressive. It's not that hard, sadly, because nobody researches cover crops. But the idea is to gather the numbers and gather the data so we can start making it easier for producers to make a better decision on their farm and utilize the right plants at the right time. And the last one, this is a vanity project of mine this past summer. So I'm on many boards, as I'm sure lots of people in this room are, in my hometown of Clearwater, Manitoba. So we have a local foundation that we just started, we were trying to bring attention to. So we at Covers & Co had a corn intercrop we were trying to bring attention to. And side note, my favorite movie is Field of Dreams. So I thought it was at about this time, May 21st, that's my right-hand man, Jace. How hard could it be to build a baseball field? You sprinkle some grass, sow some corn, invite some people out to play ball. There's a saying, we didn't do it because it was easy. We did it because we thought it was going to be easy. And boy, is that the truth. There were 2 or 3 weeks up to the end, sleepless nights. But we did. We created the most perfect day. So this was September 7th. This past year, we had 3 ball teams come out and play. We had over 800 people. We had a band and fireworks. But the most importantly, we were able to raise $60,000 for our local Clearwater Foundation. And lots of people come up and congratulate me, but I could not have done it without our team, our dealers, curious farmers like yourself. From the bottom of my heart, I just want to say to everyone in here, thank you so much. And that is the end of my presentation. How much time we got? 8 minutes. So we do have some time for some questions. Anyone got anything burning? I know I hit you with a lot of information. We got one back there, Adriana. Oh, what 8 minutes I have. uh, the simple answer to that is our crop rotation is based on carbon to nitrogen. If we have an extremely dry year where legumes were non-existent or whatever, suppressed, and we've got too high of carbon on our land, of course we're not growing canola on canola, even if we don't grow monocrop canola at all. But yeah, the focus is like, if we have an imbalance, uh, I try and we try and solve it the next year. So if we're too high in carbon, like for example that annual ryegrass that we grew, it'll be a very, very high carbon crop. The root system is there's just not a lot of protein available. So next year we'll go back in, or we are going back in with forage peas and canola intercrop. So trying to get more protein, more legumes into that. Everything we do though with the peas and the oats, the corn and the beans, it's in the name of, with the full season cover crop, warm season cover crops, it's to try and balance, have carbon to nitrogen balanced year round, have stable soil aggregates and a functioning soil so we can infiltrate water, not dependent on synthetics, that kind of thing.
So to take this another step, then are you doing 2 soil analysis a year, one in the fall, one in the spring, to know exactly what your cover crop then needs to be? Because they differ. You can look at a fall soil analysis, you can look at a spring one, and they're completely different because, like you said, soil's living, so it's curious to just how much changes between fall through the winter to the spring. So which one's more accurate for you? Because you got to plan and budget.
Yeah, in the winter. Yeah. This is probably, don't come at me. Other than we completely did baseline the farm, and we come back to that every 5 years. But unless there's interesting new shit going on in the soil test world, we don't do it. I just don't see, for the reasons that you just said, I just don't see a ton of value in a soluble soil test. Now, there's such a thing as a Haney soil test that measures biological respiration. I think it's very interesting, but it's got flawed metrics too. Most valuable tool on the farm is a water infiltrator. Tells you how stable your aggregates are. If you can infiltrate water, you can do all those things. So no, for you partially answered your own, or my question, with it's way too variable. You should soil test in the spring. A fall soil test, it just doesn't make a ton of sense to me. And now I know you got to buy the inputs and whatnot, but if you want a more accurate result, do it closer to the time when the plant is actually going to utilize those minerals. We got time for one more, I think. Yeah. Thoughts on key line design? This key, I don't even know what that is. Sorry. Well, that was a quick one. Cool. Yeah.
What's your cover crop, like after frost, that's all the, freezes and there's the nitrogen in the leaf systems, and then, like, I don't know enough about cows, but I have horses.
Yeah.
So then I can't graze my horses on the cover crop once it's frozen because of the nitrogen levels, blah. What's the difference like with cattle? I suppose you just wait a couple weeks, or what do you do in that meantime?
Well, I'm going to bore you with some chemistry. So nitrates are unnatural in a plant. I mean, something interesting, a soil test, which we were just talking about, measures nitrate nitrogen. I mean, that's great because eventually a plant can convert that into ammonium nitrogen that a plant can actually use. But like, the nitrogen we're measuring is not even the nitrogen that a plant can actually utilize. Now, with a cover crop, generally we're either reducing fertilizer or eliminating fertilizer altogether. So that's going to help you right away from a nitrate standpoint. Now, with that being said, we still the odd time see higher nitrates. Really good thing to test for, but also there's just so much lower risk when you're utilizing when a cow's got 15 options to choose, or a horse has 15 options to choose to graze, rather than I've got a vegetative oak crop that's got 150 pounds of nitrogen, it got a frost that night. Yeah, you're going to kick your cows out into that, and they've got one option for a feed source. So you better hope that it's not high nitrates, or you're going to run into some issues. And that's not to say cover crops are absolutely eliminate nitrates. We've had some feed samples, not the crazy amount, but the odd one comes back high nitrates, and we put our thinking caps on and try and figure out what happened. But far, far, far reduced risk with the, and that's just diversity. No, like a legume doesn't produce a nitrate nitrogen. It produces a plant available nitrogen right away. And that's what we're trying to do with the plant diversity, with the legumes in it, is the legumes are responsible for nitrogen capture, and different diversity is responsible for phosphorus solubilization. So it's, I mean, and this is not new. 400 million years, Mother Nature created this blueprint. We're just trying to catch up to where she is. Almost never. With cows. Yep. Oh, so like, sorry, fall cover crops. Like if I'm sowing fall rye, depends on what we're doing with it. So if we're grazing and want to go back and seed something into that, yeah, for sure. Because it'll tiller and it'll just take over. If the crop gets to anthesis, like completely mature and conditioned, like there's the odd tiller. Again, we're trying to reduce glyphosate as much as we can. Even we'll spray it with like a group 1 if we just want to get rid of just the rye. Going once? Yeah.
For the grain people that are in this, group and listening to your presentation, how do you square the circle when it comes to the nutrient cycle of using the majority of regenerative agriculture comes from the fact that we're looking at a circular loop of nutrition. So if you're a grain guy and strictly a grain guy, how do you square the circle on nutrient management and cycling of nutrients?
Great question. I thought of a decent analogy. I'll try it out on you guys. We'll see if it works. If I'm going to head to Japan, I can get there by boat, but it's going to be slow, right? I can hop on an airplane and get there super quick, where the cow is the airplane in this analogy, where it's like that an amazing ability a ruminant animal has to take wasted byproducts from a grain farm and cycle it back. The number one thing that I would say from a grain farming perspective is have a really, really good rotation based on the understanding of the principles of carbon to nitrogen. Very hard to achieve a monocrop three crop rotation and do much as far as mineral cycling. We need to get the diversity in there. So I would say step 1, lengthen your rotation. And step 2, just understand carbon to nitrogen and what crops should follow and precede what crops. That will speed it up significantly. It still won't get you there as fast as if you can make a deal with your cattle farming neighbor and get them to cycle. Sorry, Blissette.
That's what I was gonna say, step 4, talk to your local rancher. Work out some win-win magic. That's fine.
And you can make your own compost with that manure.
Yes, for sure. It pain in the ass. Sorry, now I'm going over time. I sat in on a presentation at Manitoba Ag Days just this past week and watched a farm panel, 3 farmers that I very much respect. I know them all, and they have very sharp pencils. Every one of them said they're having a hard time penciling a profit on anything other than, or on any of the monocrops, and yet peas and oats are looking profitable. Grass seed, like the annual ryegrass, you're going to have to do things that you're not comfortable with to maybe expedite the process. But intercropping is, well, I mean, when you got to grow 51 bushels of canola to break even, some of these practices should start looking more attractive. And as from a mineral cycling, how can you speed it up? You're taking 2 years and condensing it down into 1, keeping those soil aggregates stable the whole time. So it would be, lots of things. You got to understand herbicide, you got to understand seeding depth, you got to understand separation. But my argument would be it's the currently with $13 canola, it's the lowest risk and the highest profit potential from a commodity grain basis. Cool. Steve's up next. Thank you guys very much.